Dr. Jennifer Yu joined us a couple of years ago. She's one of the transplant surgeons. Within a short period of time, we were able to increase our kidney transplant volume, our pancreas volume, and because of her efforts and her colleagues, we are able now to get a record number, hopefully this year, going to 367 were the record. Today, she will talk about the kidney allocation and changes in kidney practice that happened to our center. Thank you, Dr. Yu.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Jennifer Yu. I'm one of the transplant surgeons. Thank you so much, Dr. Al-Ahmad, for the opportunity to speak. This will be a completely different change of pace from the past couple of talks, which I learned a lot about as well. So we'll talk about kidney allocation and changes in practice here at WashU and Barnes. I have no disclosures. So just a couple of objectives. We'll give a bit of background about kidney allocation in general and the current system, which is otherwise known as KAS 250, and then what we do here. So prior to 2021, kidney allocation was directed by an organization-based sort of distribution policy. So it was based completely around OPOs and donor service areas. In 2014, the major changes at that point in time were that it allowed waiting time to begin at dialysis or at time of preemptive waitlisting. KDPI was put into the system at that point. They started prioritizing biologic criteria such as sensitization and HLA matching. And then they also introduced EPTS. So all patients were assigned an EPTS score. So they started organ recipient longevity matching. The problem with that system in 2014 to 2017 or so was that it still had a lot of geographic disparities because, as you can imagine, donor service areas were very different across the country. And we'll kind of look at that in a couple of slides here. So that's why I changed the system. There were inconsistent local and regional boundaries for the DSAs. There were differences between the DSAs that contributed to widely variable waiting times for patients across the country, particularly for those with very dense urban centers. Then access to transplant depends significantly on geographic location with consequent disparities in patient care. Oh, sorry. Speak close to the mic. Sorry. So sorry. So in 2021, the kidney allocation system, as we currently know it, or KS 250, was launched. This changed the system from an OPO distribution to a proximity to donor hospital distribution system. It aligned with what had already been released for liver, heart, lung allocation systems, and the goal was really to increase equity and transplant access nationwide. To address the differences in local organ supply as well as differences among transplant centers in their willingness to accept kidney offers and their waitlisting practices. So here, these are the concentric circles that I think many of you are familiar with. The KS 250 looked at different patient factors, including medical urgency, the distance from the donor hospital, candidate biology or compatibility with the donor, between donors and recipients, and then the predicted 1 year post-transplant survival, so EPTS. Points were assigned to candidates at various steps of a sequence in the organ offer process. And so this is the key point of KS 250 and why there's such a push to use continuous distribution, which is coming, but has not been released yet. So if you look here, you can kind of consider the 4 different candidates in terms of who would be offered a kidney first. So if you look at the first concentric circle around the donor hospital, patients, A and C, so Cincinnati and Atlanta, would be offered this kidney first, regardless of, certain factors. So the prioritization, took certain factors into account before others. So even though, candidate, D had the highest compatibility, because they were outside that 250 nautical miles, they would be offered the kidney after someone who had a lower compatibility score, for instance. So continuous distribution, hopefully potentially we'll address this in the future. This is kind of just a screen grab from DonorNet, which I think many of you probably use, but it kind of goes down the different categories that, patients are prioritized by. So in looking at, for instance, the top, these are patients who are highly sensitized. So those are the ones that have the highest priority in terms of getting the offers first. And then as you go down, it goes from 250 nautical miles to the nation. And then the next one is, the medical urgency. Then it goes down to, the 99% CPRA, 98% CPRA. And so then all the way down the list to where it's just 250 nautical miles, blood type permissible. And that was sort of where we came up for that specific offer. So, what are the issues, though, with KAS 250? One, as you can imagine, this has significantly increased operational complexity. So, to the right side, you can see kind of a network like connectivity diagram that I found really interesting. So, transplant centers now interact with a median of 9 OPOs within 250 nautical miles. Prior to that, it was 1, and we'll show you kind of like our own data too. And so then, OPOs have had a 10-fold increase in the median number of transplant centers that they interact with as well. So this is on the order of, 30 to 40 to 50 sometimes transplant centers that a single OPO will have to interact with for an offer. Donor hospitals also have a median now of 23 transplant centers versus 5 previously within a 250 nautical mile radius. So you can see how the connectivity has changed substantially, with this new allocation system. This was a study done recently that I found really interesting too. So looking at what happened prior to KAS 250 to post, there was a 70% increase in offer volume to transplant centers with a minimal to negligible and no significant difference in actual transplant volume. So the workload has dramatically increased in terms of taking offers, having to process offers without actually changing much of what we're actually doing practically. And then here, you can also see that the median number of centers offered prior to the first offer acceptance has doubled. So, a kidney would have to be offered to twice as many centers. So 10 centers versus 5, for instance, before that kidney is accepted, which increases cold ischemic time, transport logistics, all the different things that we live with every day. Here is kind of a map of the United States that just shows kind of the proportional change in offer volume after KAS 250 was implemented. So you can see, I know it's really difficult, I'm sorry. The blue triangles just show kind of the dispersal of offer volume and how they've increased across the country, mostly in the Northeast and the Midwest, which are the very high sort of dense urban centers that you can imagine. But there hasn't been a proportional change of, a similar concurrent proportional change in transplant volume. So you can see that those same, very dark blue dots are in the top map do not correlate to the ones in the bottom map in terms of transplant volume increase or change. And then here, this was from a study that was done at a single center. This was from Baylor, Dallas, that shows that, despite the blue line going way up after, the kidney circle-based allocation started, they had a 61% donor discard rate compared to a 42% donor discard rate. So these are kidneys that are actually ultimately not used, despite the number of offers going up, as well as, they looked at also in the yellow, kidney donor offers that were not used at any center. So that, went from, 58%, which, was higher, to 39%. So the actual number of kidneys dropped. So there are actually more organs being discarded now than previously. And their green line, that is their single center experience, didn't really change. So their actual transplant numbers did not change. Here, I found this diagram. This is from the same study. Interestingly, this is the flow, and it was very appropriate. This is what we live with, for every single offer that we get, for every single call that the call coordinators get. This is the workflow. And so as soon as, the call comes in, half gets screened out at that time that the answering call coordinators get. And then that goes to our actual transplant coordinator. They then kind of screen the offer, they look at the recipient, and then they call the surgeon. The surgeons are the orange blocks, the green is our sort of transplant coordinators. And then, it goes down and, the number of hours that are spent has dramatically increased. So you can kind of see there's, been a doubling essentially after KAS 250 was implemented of the time spent by every single group in this workflow. Which they kind of they calculate out to be approximately a 97% increase in the number of hours. So here, looking specifically at kind of our region, this is our donor service area, so MTS or Mid-America Transplant. So prior to 2021, there was prioritization within our donor service area. So we were the main users because there are 4 transplant centers in our area, which we'll show, that basically had priority for all the offers. Now we're competing against 7 other transplant areas, and this is I actually did not calculate out how many transplant centers there are, but we're competing against Chicago, Memphis, Nashville, Kansas City, so lots of other transplant centers who are now taking our excellent low KDPI kidneys. So. So just showing you here at MoMA in the 57 sort of OPOs across the country, and then the 4 transplant centers that, are within our donor service area. So we, similarly to that other study, have had a 200% increase in organ offers over the last couple of years, and you can see this is many thanks to our team for providing me with this data. But this is all organ systems, and you can see kidney in the dark blue at the bottom. Definitely, kind of an increase over the last few years, particularly after 2021. Looking specifically at the year sort of prior to the allocation change and after, this is interesting because, you can see we used to take 85% of our kidneys from MoMA, and now it's only 42%. And so you can see that the neighboring states, so MWB is Kansas City, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, now provide the vast majority of, our kidneys. So it's all the neighboring states. But that does increase our transport time, cold ischemic time logistics. This was from kind of a study done right at our center right after allocation change in 2022, but you can see that now we are importing more kidneys, so similar to what we just showed. And then, this is looking at, what the effects of it have been. So, it has definitely increased the KDPI of the kidneys that we're accepting, and a little bit of the, DGF rate that we're seeing too. So looking at the year prior and then the year post, we, had almost 70% of our kidneys were 50% KDPI or lower prior to KS250 being implemented, and now 52% are more than that. So we have a higher KDPI, and then DGF has gone from 21% to 28%. Similar, kind of showing in a similar fashion for DGF. The DGF rate is just increasing, post 2021. And then here, cold ischemic time, looking at, previous to 2021, our cold ischemic time using 24 hours as the cutoff, 52%, were over, I guess, the 24-hour mark at that point. Now, 78% of our kidneys are over the 24-hour mark in terms of cold ischemic time, which kind of just shows how much time it just takes to get the kidney to our center. And then in kind of other numerical format here. And then EPTS, we're transplanting, it goes along with that. We're transplanting older and sicker patients, basically. And it also, I think, underscores a little bit of how OPOs are now allocating kidneys, because they're going outside of the match just to get these kidneys allocated, because the cold time is accruing, and so then they'll start going to expedited offers more quickly, and so then oftentimes this means, I think, that older and sicker patients are getting transplanted. So in conclusion, I think increased offer volume has increased the workload for transplant centers and staff with a greater logistical burden of allocation for both centers and OPOs. We haven't seen, kind of a concurrent increase in transplant volume. True, there has been an increase in kidney transplants overall, but not as much as you would expect with the number of offers that have come through. OPO variability and the efficiency of organ placement, like we were saying, increasingly resorting to out-of-sequence allocation to place kidneys. And more kidneys are actually being discarded now. And then, we'll have to, kind of sort out the consequences of transitioning to a distance-based allocation system. So, continuous distribution, yet to be determined, the effects on kind of transplant centers and how our workflows will be. Will this really improve, sort of or decrease geographic disparities, improve patient equity? So, thank you so much.
Thank you for the talk. But I guess, have you found that using renal perfusion pumps have reduced the risk of DGF compared to cold storage, especially long distance wise?
You mean the perfusion pumps for the kidneys?
Right.
Yeah, we tend to, as our practice, ask for kidneys to be pumped, particularly because the cold ischemic times are, increasing overall. So if we have the option, we will almost always ask, especially if a kidney's being transported from another OPO, if they can put it on pump for us, or we'll ask our team here at MTS if a kidney is coming boxed in static cold storage to put it on pump if we're going to, wait to go until the next morning. We don't tend to generally put kidneys in at night in terms of resource utilization, patient safety, all of those different factors. So we tend to do kidneys during the day, but It is, something that we do try to maximize use of the pumps as much as we can.
Have you found a reduction in rates of DGF?
Sorry, to your question. I think that statistically, yes, but I don't know that we've looked at our rates, our centers rates specifically recently. I think that overall, national data has shown that it does. There's a Cochrane review that shows that it does improve rates of DGF. So, and I don't think there's any harm, obviously, in using perfusion pumps. I think that it definitely gives us additional data in terms of the pump numbers, in terms of, just looking more closely at the anatomy of the kidney, understanding, looking at the actual quality of the tissue of the aorta, et cetera, that the kidney's coming with. So, I think that the perfusion pump is a useful adjunct for sure.
Do you still have your all in-house coordinators to deal with all that organ calls, or?
We have a team. We actually just implemented a call system about a year ago now, where there are 5 dedicated call coordinators that take 24-hour call from home. They do work remotely, but they are taking all of the organ offers, for abdominal, and then there's a separate cardiothoracic team. But it's a lot. It's a lot for them. It's a lot for us. I have to say that was probably the biggest learning curve for me in terms of becoming, a faculty. It was that, the volume of, this, you go from, I think talking to like the intern at night and talking to the floor at night to, talking to your coordinator. I mean, I think over a 48-hour period of call, I spent probably, I think I counted, I talked to her on the phone 20 times, and I had at least 50 text messages each day. So.
Yeah, many of our coordinators left because of that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
We hired there was companies outside of the program. So we hired them, but they don't have their ownership.
Right. There are a lot of third-party, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a lot of centers are using third-party organizations to deal with calls. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Our program, the surgeons are really nice. So they really jump in and they do the coordinator's job.
Yes.
Despite twice the workload.
What a great segue to Dr. Khan's talk, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.